Alale, 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 kulele, alale, 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 alale.
So many of you, I'm sure, have seen the photos on Facebook and Instagram, on Twitter, of travelers taking selfies with lion cubs, travelers riding on elephants and camels, thinking this is the thing to do when you go out there, and it's a bucket list thing. Or maybe you're swimming with dolphins, or maybe, you're the one doing it too, thinking it's okay. Apparently, no, it's not that okay for the wildlife. And these activities are not only unnecessary in the tourism industry, but it is harmful to animals and wildlife, and that's honestly, they belong in the wild. That's why they're called wildlife. I'm just saying. Got to say it.
That's a good point.
So, wildlife conservation expert Adam Roberts is joining us back on Big Blend Radio. We call him the compassionate conservationist. And today he's going to talk about what we can do as travelers regarding animal welfare. How do we keep animal welfare in mind? Because a lot of times we don't even really understand we're animal lovers, but because a culture does something doesn't really mean that we need to do that too. So he's going to talk about that and also about a new tourism consultancy that works in partnership with travel businesses, not-for-profit organizations, and governments so that tourism brings greater protection to animals, their natural environments, and the people that depend upon them. And, I was researching this today, and it looks like actually the economic benefits for tourism would be greater if we didn't harm animals or put them in reach of our hands. Or maybe the selfies with lion clubs. So everybody, blendradioandtv.com, that's where we'll find Adam and his past interviews with us as well. But Adam, welcome back to the show and Happy New Year. How are you?
Happy New Year to you. Good evening. I'm doing very, very well, except I'm in Washington, D.C., which means I'm constantly bombarded by bad news. So I'm trying to be at peace with it all.
I know, man. It's like, I don't know, but I mean, everywhere around the country and around the world, we're all dealing with it. It just seems like, but can we take people's buttons away? Like, I'm just saying, can we undo the button and undo some things that need to be undone? And some things are not doing well for our public lands, definitely, and in so many ways, oil and gas leasing, extra hunting that maybe doesn't need to happen in wildlife management. And then you've also got, 19 out of 32, if I don't know if I'm getting the numbers right, of the advisory board of the National Parks Service walking out. So there seems to be a lot of things happening for our wildlife in this country. So I wouldn't want to be in Washington, D.C. Do you ever get scared?
It's interesting. I mean, I am scared thinking about all the things you just talked about, sort of the planet that we're going to leave to our children if this goes on much longer. And it's interesting doing this show now and talking about what we're talking about with, as you mentioned, the news that the National Park System Advisory Board is losing fundamentally almost all of its members because they're so fed up with a Secretary of the Interior who refuses to even meet with them over the course of a year. And, of course, why would he take recommendations about what to do with national lands when he and the administration are already hell-bent on doing things like reducing the size of national monuments in Utah and such? So, it's kind of an all-out assault on national parks and national lands, which makes me, scared and sad, but also makes me emboldened to not only want to do more to help, and make sure that Americans and people from everywhere around the world are coming to visit, these amazing natural places that we have, but also makes me, quite frankly, want to redouble my commitment to getting out and seeing these magnificent wild places. You guys, you travel so much around the country and get to see all these places and broadcasts from all of these wonderful natural places that we have around the country. But it's been making me think a lot today and then over the past few days especially about the need for all of us to try and get out and show with our tourism dollars that these places are incredibly valuable in their pristine state.
This is so important too. We look at that they're threatened, in so many ways, and we've doubled down on our nationalparktraveling.com website, even giving free page listings to nonprofits and to chambers and visitor bureaus and things, so people can have that direct access. So we can, because we believe that the community and the parks have to be united. I know we've talked about that on the shows before, but I think that's even going even more into what we're going to talk about today on how we can, look at what we're doing when we go to a community. Because whatever we do to an animal is going to hurt the people and vice versa. And
right.
So there's that. But the other thing I just want to touch on with the public lands is to get out, yes. And 2/3 of our national park system is historic, and they're also under threat. And I challenge anybody to go to a national park unit and tell me you didn't learn anything about nature, or vice versa, you didn't learn about history. Each one has both those elements, and it's learn and play, right? And there's the issue too is climate change, which we have been just knocking down, and a lot of our areas are getting, the wildfires have been crazy in the West, California, Montana, just really, really we got it out here in Arizona pretty bad, and the hurricanes and things like that. So the weather patterns are going worse, and so when we also look at management and look at these lands, we need to look at these lands are going. We need to look at that as well, because it's happening, and these places are going to start to diminish. Before we even get into the animal part, I wanted to ask you: isn't it 50% that we of like the wildlife, we've lost that over the last 10 years or 20 years or something? There's like a statistic of that, like 50 or 75%. We've lost huge amounts of our wildlife in actual species over the last 20 years. And I'm wondering, like, where do we go from here? We need to really look at every single animal as being absolutely important, not just the big five,
Yeah, I think that's right, and I think it's a combination of factors. So you mentioned climate change, and of course, the way to balance the ecological systems is to, again, keep these places pristine. That's the best way to keep the ecology in balance. And the more that we industrialize and pollute and destroy these natural places, the worse off the environment and therefore the climate is going to be, and that's incredibly dangerous for wild animals and, of course, for people as well. And then the second part, in terms of what you mentioned with the loss of wildlife, is that you have this dramatic commodification of wildlife that's happened over the past 20 or 30 years, where there's literally a price on the head of every wild animal by sport hunters. Wild animals are trapped for their fur; they're exploited in so many different ways, and their habitat is depleted. And so you have this all-out assault on wild animals all across the globe, but definitely throughout the United States. And that does mean that wildlife populations are going to decline and that species are going to go extinct. And, of course, the more that human-made factors result in wildlife disappearing, the more the ecosystem goes out of balance. And, again, that's really bad for everyone, because, the planet is incredibly fragile. It's resilient, but it's also fragile. And we really need these ecosystems, I think, to stay in balance.
Yeah, one of the things we tend to forget when we talk about business and tourism dollars and such is that how big a factor wildlife is. Because I know that our national parks, our BLM land, our state parks that harbor plants and animals in safety are a huge draw and a huge factor for economic benefit to all the surrounding communities. And, sometimes it's so easy because the American cry is create jobs, create jobs, create jobs. But they seldom take a look at what kind of jobs where and how does that affect a community. For example, gas and oil, create jobs. Let's go for coal, create jobs. But then you have this thing I think I want to call it put all your eggs in one basket. So a company comes into a town, and it's a mining company, and they mine until it's too expensive to mine anymore, and then they close down, and everybody just sitting there looking around going, now what? As opposed to if they're right next to any kind of natural area where people will come in with the tourism dollar. That doesn't happen, because when you look at tourism dollars, it's spread out with restaurants, hotels, attractions, events, and so there's all kinds of jobs. It's not all dependent on one company. And that's where I think people kind of forget or don't see that the tourism dollar, how important it is. One of the biggest industries in the world. It's so important, and it is balanced with coming to see something natural, something that you can't see where you live over there. You want to see something different. And when you have a mining company or gas and oil feuds and all that, you not only do you not see anything worth seeing, they destroy the thing that will keep your community sustainable
and healthy.
And and that's what the tourism dollar is so important if it's done responsibly and sustainably. In wildlife, natural habitat is a huge part of it, because that's what gives you something different, as well as your history of your community. So it shouldn't be tearing down all those old historic buildings either.
Yeah.
Mhm. And I think to that, it's a question of, as a society with government policy, do we want to have short-term fixes or long-term sustainable objectives? Because the short-term fix is very easy. We can open up all of the coastlines of this country to drilling and do offshore drilling, and we can mine and drill all across the country, and that may provide a short-term fix, a short-term economic fix, a short-term employment fix, but that's not sustainable. I mean, forget the dangers to the environment, forget the dangers to the wildlife and to people. All of that, of course, exists, and at any point in time, mines can go wrong, oil spills happen, all of that is risky. But in the long term, you're just destroying the environment, the resources will expire, and then you're left with the wreckage of what you've wrought, as opposed to thinking long term about building sustainable economies around sustainable businesses, which are still economically profitable, but are economically profitable in perpetuity as opposed to in the short term. And you're exactly right when you talk about the value of tourism. We've seen it time and time again that when we have respectful, responsible, compassionate tourism, it is going to mean that people can come see the same elephant year after year after year. But when you kill an elephant, when you have consumptive tourism, then that elephant is gone from that community, and that's that. Can't ever come back. So I think we have to take a very long view, which of course is not the MO of what we're dealing with currently, in the administration. Everything is about short-term fixes and stock market gains, but we really have to push as a citizenry for this long-term view that's going to provide measurable and tangible results for years to come.
And I think it's true. You've got your community, but then as a traveler, we need to look at going in and not bringing in toxic things into it. All these park rangers we've interviewed, I mean, it got right down to it. We've got an interview coming up, and it's soon for everyone to hear. We have to record them with our park rangers because their schedules are off the hook crazy now, because there's so few. Just saying. Anyway, we were talking about bats. And you know how we love bats, Adam. Anyway, so we were talking about bats and this whole issue of bats in the daylight and hunting at daylight and what's going on here and there. And she was talking about this fungus, this white fungus or something?
Yeah, white nose
fungus. Yeah. And she was talking about how it's from travelers. And the fact is, when we go into a national park, clean your backpack off, clean the bottom of your shoes, clean it off. Wipe it down before you go in. Throw that cloth away. Don't bring it into the park. And so when we talk about sustainability, a lot of times it's like, hey, don't take your big gassy truck into a park. We think about those things. Don't leave plastic things around, and don't have these one-off plastic things that people use. Don't have plastic water bottles. Actually use something recyclable. All these things we can do. Maybe take public transportation when you're traveling. So there's all these things we can do as sustainability. But now we're actually down to this point of you need to clean your stuff before you walk into a park, because we're contaminating the wildlife. And this is where we're at this point. And so to me it was blowing my mind, and we'll be airing this soon, everyone. But when we think about travelers, there's a community setting up, the parks battling it. There's this community connection to the parks, whether it's a state park, the BLM land, it's all important. I don't care. It's a forest. It's all important. But as travelers, there's things we can do. And, there's so many people we've had on shows, we've talked to friends. They're like, oh, when we went to Asia, we rode an elephant. It was like this, big thing. It's the obligatory thing to do. And take that photo, put it up on Instagram. And I did it. And then it gets to this point of like, okay, well, what are we doing? This is the thing that we've seen in, magazines years ago, and now we've changed. So we don't have that many elephants, so maybe we have to slow down. We have to look at how we travel.
Right. And I think, but again, I think it's exactly right. It also comes back, I think, to what I was just saying about these short-term fixes, that, we have this idea that we deserve some sort of gratification, and that could come by elephant-back safari, or diving with sharks, or swimming with dolphins, or petting a lion cub, as you mentioned in the introduction, or taking a picture with a chimpanzee in Cancun. There are all of these methods by which human travelers, tourists, get that short-term fix, get that immediate fix, and that immediate gratification. And I've realized, having sort of some distance from all of this work now for the past year, that the story you can tell is just as exciting without that fix. So many of the stories that I tell about animal exploitation that I've seen around the world, which we, definitely can get into, those are sad stories. And I am so glad that I'm at least enlightened enough not to have been a part of it. But I look back to going to India, where I've been twice, to do work about tigers, including a CNN show about tigers. And in neither time out in the forests of India did I see a tiger. And that was disappointing. Of course, I would have loved to have seen a wild tiger, but I realized that, it's a privilege to see a wild tiger. It's not a right. And the fact that I didn't see a wild tiger doesn't really change my stories about India, but for one line. I could say, and I saw a wild tiger and it was amazing, or, I went 2 times, I can't believe it, I didn't see a tiger. I did a whole show about tigers. I didn't even see a tiger. There's still a story to tell.
Can I
and then
just say, dude.
Yeah. Exactly. But when I was there, I distinctly remember that question being asked, should we go out on elephant back because you have a better chance of seeing a tiger? And of course, for us, the answer was immediate. There's just no way we're doing that. We're not going to exploit Asian elephants for the sake of seeing Asian tigers. But nonetheless, at the end of the day, it's just not worth it. It's just not worth it to destroy these animals' lives, to make it harder on them, to exploit them in that kind of negative way, just for our own gratification, when there is so much amazing stuff to see in the world and to be a part of and to experience in a respectful and responsible way. You just don't have to do that kind of exploitative activities.
Well, I think that's something Nancy and I learned on the tour. As we traveled the country going in the national parks, and when we did it full time, and now that we've come home, we're still now doing big road trips. We've got epic things planned this year. We're going to Louisiana and Kentucky and back up to Sequoias and all kinds of places. But when we set out, when we went to the parks, and now I'm so glad we did what we did, because now we're able to really see what is needed to gel the communities and the parks and the travelers and make that like, okay, now we see what's going on. And now it's like a fire under our butt, quite frankly. Like we need to haul, because time is of the essence, and people do need to go there, and we need to have it balanced out. Our thing is, we don't want people in the parks all the time. We want them in the parks, then go midweek, light footprint, then go into the downtowns and go experience small town America. Go to a real restaurant, not with McDonald's arches on it. Sorry, but it's true. Do the real thing. But when we were there, just even in our videos, now we've changed our platform. We wanted to go in and make the epitome of this is this park. Every little thing that you could see in Sequoia National Park, we want in the video. We want everything in there, right? And so we kept going back in and back in, because it is like a drug. You just keep going back in and keep going back in and keep going back in, and you're never going to see everything. And when you're never, and we learned that because we got excited, and we're used to, like, nature is like a daily thing for us, and it just. That is a big lesson for us, just as a company trying to do the right thing. We still want to see everything, but you can't. And the reality is, coming back and looking at the footage we have, I could sit there every day on Instagram and never end on what I have and of what I don't know what I filmed and learn about it. Every leaf has a story to tell about a bug and then what ate the bug and then, that whole web of life. Every living little thing that you see has a story. And there's a lot of human history that goes with that too, and it's so fascinating. And that's, I think, where we need to go as a society is look at actually what do we have on our doorsteps. What good can we find, and what can we build on that too as a long-term thing.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right.
I think when you are paying to travel, you want to see something unique and different. I don't think a zoo over here is any more different or unique than the zoo over there. I think that what is unique is the actual natural plants and animals in a different place at a different time. And those things, you have to guard and protect them. That's different. In riding an elephant, or one time in South Africa, we went to an ostrich farm, and I think I've told you this story before, but I was so amazed. First of all, okay, there's a lot of ostrich. You see the eggs and how the ostriches were being farmed and raised. It's very educational, different, and weird. And then I didn't know they were going to do this, but they had an ostrich race, and they took people out of the crowd who were willing to sit on the ostrich back and race. And there was a really plus-size woman who sat on this ostrich who just closed his eyes and bent down to the ground because she was so much heavier than what this poor, and ostriches are not weak, could handle. And then he tried to stand up, and he couldn't, and then he got whipped for not being able to stand. Now, our group walked out at that because that is not something we wanted to see. It was horrific. And so I think there are some things where people think it's a plus for tourism. It totally isn't. I'm sticking on the tourism dollar because, I personally believe that you should be able to protect animals and plants just because they're there and they're beautiful, whether or not you make money off them. But my years in the tourism industry has shown me that you need to put a dollar value before somebody cares somehow. So I'm just going to stick with the tourism dollar, that you can lose tourism by doing the wrong thing with your plants and animals and how you treat them, and you can gain the tourism dollar if you protect your plants and animals.
Yeah, and I think as people become more educated about these issues and more enlightened about these issues, that becomes increasingly the right perspective that people will have. When we see these kinds of things, the ostrich racing that you mentioned, which is of course ridiculous. I remember in Thailand going to tiger zoos and outside of Bangkok, and they have Asian elephants performing, and people sit in these amphitheaters and they watch elephants playing musical instruments in a band and playing basketball, and then they pull people out of the stands to lie down in front of the elephants, and the elephants pretend like they're giving them a Thai massage. And of course, I think, my God, that's got to be nerve-wracking to be underneath this elephant's foot. One wrong move and you're crushed. But it's horrible for the animals. It's so horribly exploitative, and people, they go to those things because they're just not aware. And so I think it's really important for people to be educated about what they're going to do before they go do it. When you're going on a vacation, when you're planning a vacation, make sure you actually take the time, obviously, to do the research to know what you're doing and what the impacts are. Is it something that you should do or something you think you should do because it seems, elephant back safari, for example, like something you should do, and test it out. Make sure that do the research. Make sure that you're not exploiting animals in wild places in a horrible way. I think that's part of it, and then also realizing that there is so much amazing wildlife tourism and wild tourism out there, places to go, things to see, that simply don't involve that kind of exploitation. Living in the local communities, visiting the local communities, as you were talking about, the local restaurant versus the McDonald's. that is the kind of immersive tourism that's really important, but also compassionate and leaves a low footprint. So people just have to be more aware of that. But the other thing I want to say about that is not only about individuals doing the research before they do the trip, it's about the tourism companies, the travel agents that people work with, being enlightened and learning about these issues and making sure that they're not directing people to swim with the dolphin programs and other exploitative adventures. And that's really important. That's a responsibility of the industry to make sure that they're not directing people to these really bad attractions.
You have to look at who you partner with. And I think that's what I want to go to, this new tourism consultancy, and you get to say the name because I have like 10 different ways. I do. Yeah. And I'm like, I'm leaving it for Adam. I did it at the beginning of the show, and then I'm like, okay, But what I think is so interesting, and I watched a video, of the launch of this industry, this organization, which I think is so important because I remember, was it a year ago, Adam, you were on the show, maybe 6 months ago, and TripAdvisor was, showcasing, Ride an Elephant, and everybody was like, no, screw you. Sorry, I have to say it because it's true. But don't do that. Those who have really traveled and saw the other side, and some of this is the thing. It's about exactly what you're saying, about these tourism organizations coming in and thinking they have a good partner. And the thing is, a tourist sometimes goes into a town and they're like, oh my gosh, I see an elephant, and it's the first time they've seen it. You see a sequoia tree and you're in awe, and then you hug it, and then maybe people carve their name in it thinking this is okay. No, it's not. The plant, the tree feels it. You stop it. Same thing, you're in awe, but then you don't know what harm you're doing, and maybe not recognizing a good from a bad. You don't know if you've never been in that country. You don't know, So I think it's really about the organizations like TripAdvisor. They did stop it, as far as I know, and I think it's the public needs to be aware as much as they can. But it is those actual organizations. Who are you promoting? And that's where this tourism consultancy. I think this is so cool. And I'm going to say the website is ANIMONDIAL, .com. So tell us the name, Adam.
Yeah, well, hey, I'm an English speaker. I'm monolingual. I hate that fact. I wish I hadn't grown up that way. But anyway, it's Animondial, which I think literally translated means animals of the world. And it's really sort of looking at just that, animals all over the world and what our impact is when we're tourists on these animals, and how can we bring compassion to tourism. And as you say, it's this really amazing new consultancy that's been set up just to do the very things we've been talking about, to sort of say that there are practical solutions out there that will benefit tourism, benefit people, benefit local economies, benefit national economies and business, but also have a very low footprint on animals and make sure that tourism is compassionate. And I think you have, situations where a lot of these tourism agencies, these tour operating associations, they sort of go through the motions, right? They do the same thing. We're going to the Caribbean, we're doing Swim with the Dolphin programs, that sort of thing, because there hasn't historically been anyone, there have been campaigns against that kind of activity, but there's no concerted effort to bring all the stakeholders together to say that, we need to get the travel businesses and the non-governmental organizations and the government stakeholders and the people on the ground all together to say, how can we create the highest standards possible to ensure that any tourism that's happening that involves animals is compassionate. And of course, I think we have to just make sure as we talk about this sort of stuff that, animal-based tourism is not inherently bad, right? There's animal tourism that is exploitative in a bad way, and animal tourism that's exploitative in a perfectly good way. It all depends on, whether you have the sensibility going in. You don't want wild animals to be captive. You don't want wild animals to be tormented. It's the old Masai Mara example, where you've got these jeeps that are racing after cheetahs or lions or other animals in the Masai Mara, as opposed to just sort of jeeps that are sitting back and watching from a healthy distance. Or the same goes with whale watching, right? You don't want to chase the whales and run the risk of having whale strikes with your boat, you want to watch whales from a respectable distance. So there is a way to quote unquote exploit wildlife, but do so in a compassionate and humane way. And so this consultancy, Ana Mondiale, has set forth in starting in England, but they'll expand throughout Europe and eventually to America, just to do that very thing, to say, we need to make sure that tour operators and the associations of tour operators all understand these very intricate, detailed issues and pay attention to them, and only have participation by travel companies, tour operators, and industry associations that adhere to these high standards. And I think little by little, I do believe that you're going to start to see this more and more. You're going to start to see the Expedias of the world and other, tour operators and travel agencies start to focus on these issues, because they know, as we discussed earlier, long term it's in their economic interest to do so, that people really will, just as they seek cruelty-free cosmetics and humanely raised foods, they're going to start to seek out compassionate travel.
I was going to say, is this going to be similar to, I know over the years you've talked about the Global Federation of Animal Sanctuaries, and it's like this organization you can go to, and like people say you're a sanctuary, and then, an animal sanctuary, you go there to either donate, maybe go to an event, or maybe you're allowed to view the animals, or, and then there's the ones that say they're a sanctuary, and it's the Tony the Tiger who did pass, and now they want to get a new one. Unfortunately, in Louisiana, that's, at a gas station, and they call themselves a sanctuary. So there's those two things, and so is this kind of going to work in that way where people can look up at some point, is this a place that is a no-no on the list versus a okay place to go, and that kind of thing, like the sanctuaries, where you can figure out who is a good person and who's a bad, who's evil and who's not.
Yeah, exactly right. It's the exact right analogy. With GFAS, the Global Federation of Animal Sanctuaries, one can always know that if a sanctuary is GFAS accredited and has the GFAS stamp of approval, that seal means that they're a sanctuary that doesn't exploit animals for profit, that doesn't let animals leave the property, that doesn't sell animals, breed animals, etc., that it's a true sanctuary, as opposed to some backyard breeder who calls himself a sanctuary as a way of getting money from the public. With Ana Mondiale, it's the exact same thing, where over time you're going to start to know that when you're booking your holidays and you want to decide which tour operator, which travel agent, which travel company to use, see if they have been working with Ana Mondiale to make sure that the excursions they promote are going to be compassionate ones for animals, and make sure that when you're booking holidays and you're going to a certain location, if they have animals, are those animals treated well? Is it wild and respectful, or is it, just another roadside zoo or negatively exploitative situation? Looking for Ana Mondiale's stamp of approval, if you will help you figure out, what to do along the way. And I think, again, this is going to be, I think, a long process as we change people's thinking about these kind of endeavors, to get away from going to, the zoo in Bangkok and seeing the elephant performance, or going to the swim with the dolphins or swim with the sharks or any of these exploitative things. It's going to take time for people to start going on excursions, on holidays where they don't have these kind of animal experiences, and realize that they're just as amazing and exciting, and doesn't leave you with that icky feeling because you just took a picture for $1 on the streets of Cancun with a chained chimpanzee. And over time, people will realize that, and given the world that we live in, everyone else will realize that too, because it'll go straight on social media, it'll go on TripAdvisor, it'll go on, all of these different websites. And I think more and more you're going to start to see people actually seek that out. Is this a travel company I want to go with? And one of the reasons that I'll be making that decision is, how do they treat animals? Do they promote, excursions that exploit animals in a bad way? And if they do, then, that's not a company I want to go with. So from the corporate perspective, from the business perspective, people are going to, I think, yearn for this kind of involvement, this stakeholder involvement, and this involvement from Ana Mondiale, because they know they're going to want to bring in business from people who want to go on holidays that don't harm animals.
I was looking at their website, and everybody, again, Animondial, did I say that correctly, .com? And I was looking at some of the we're going to be featuring them up on nationalparktraveling.com and in Park and Travel magazine, and they said that there was a survey done, a ComRes survey through Born Free Foundation, 2017, and they said that they did this whole survey about the risks and the tourism regarding to tourism activities involving animals. 49% of the respondents confirmed that their enjoyment of a holiday would be reduced if they observed animal abuse during their stay, how it ruins it. And then 71% said they would more likely buy holidays from travel companies that care for animals. And so I think people love animals. We want to see horses, we want to see the camels, we want to see the ostrich. They do love animals. They don't want to see the abuse. And there's the wildlife side of it with the ostriches, but then there's also things like just horse riding. And I want to bring that up. We know people that do horse riding that is completely healthy, clean. It's about safety for the animals, safety for the people. And then there's these companies that, oh my God, these horses need to be fed, and what are you doing? So there's the rides that people take downtown on a horse and carriage. New York, come on. What they've been doing. So, is this going to look at that too? Because that is kind of what's going on in some countries. Is that too? I think horses. There's a connection, American connection, but there's a responsibility. So, where I'm going with this is there going to be some way down the road? Because I know this has just started up and has really a good path forward and a lot of good backers and tourism associations behind it, especially in England. Will they look at working with these organizations to better them if they're not good, or say you need to close down, or kind of get in that zone, or is it just ignore them if they're bad?
Yeah, no. So I think it's two things in response to that. One is to the latter part of your question. There will always be an emphasis on trying to improve standards, right? You have to improve the standards and then enforce those standards. So, the first part is to say, here are the ways that travel companies should operate. Here are the types of excursions that are no-go areas and ones that are acceptable. And then enforcing that, making sure that these companies are not sending people to these excursions that are harmful to animals. And so you have to make sure that happens and try and get to these people, get to these companies to let them know what's good and what's bad. Because, again, if the average consumer is yearning to go swim with dolphins and the businesses are providing it, they might not have an impetus to get too in the weeds about, what's happening on the ground and how bad is it. They just think, well, we'll seek out what seems like a quote-unquote reputable business and we'll partner with them so that people can get the kind of animal experience they're asking for. But when the standards are set and people start to see that and they know that they might lose business because they're not adhering to those standards, then I think things will change. On the first part about the horse riding and such, I think that's the next step in all of this, is to not only first come up with these operational or industry-based standards about good excursions versus bad ones, but then secondly to really drill down on a species-specific level and say, when we're dealing with horseback riding, here are the things that become environmental enrichment for horses, and that's good for the animals, and here are the things that are no-go areas, the bad type of exploitation, the things that are harmful for these animals, what to look for, and the same will go for any number of other species as well. You really need to know what's a respectable distance to watch a whale, for example. So I think that is something that's going to have to be looked at over time, is when we talk about these animal attractions and animal-based tourism, what is it from the animal's perspective that is needed so that those animals are not harmed in any way by tourism, and how do we provide that in a measurable way?
Right.
I think it's interesting that we're so fascinated by animals that we really want to go see them and get close to them. Obviously, that's why people go to zoos. They want to go see the animals so badly that they're willing to go see them while they're locked up. Even though they didn't do anything wrong, they didn't rob a bank or anything like that, they didn't do anything but just be who they are, but they're locked up. But there's a fascination that you want to go see these animals so bad. So if you can think to why you want that connection, would you not rather see or have the chance of a glimpse of an animal in the wild being its own self, as opposed to one who's locked up for your benefit? Because what animal are you trying to see? Because an animal locked up in the zoo is nothing like an animal in the wild who gets to be free and who
there's such joy just watching.
Yeah,
I mean, it's just
so,
such a joy.
And maybe you go out in the wilderness and you don't see the animal, like you didn't see the tiger, you know. But you know, that's really not that. I get. Is it going to be substituted for you by going to a zoo and seeing one caged up that you know is now miserable and caged up just for you and for money? I mean, and it's not a real it's a real tiger physically. I can't even say that with honesty. It's not a real tiger.
No.
It's not a tiger, because you know in the wild they don't look like what animals look like in a zoo. They don't act the same. They're pretty much psychotic in zoos, especially monkeys go really crazy. Yeah, so what are you really seeing? You're not really seeing the animal you are hoping and wishing and praying to see.
That's right, and fundamentally on that, you know, I would say there are three types of people in the world. There are people who understand everything that you just said. You know, people who would never go to do any of these kinds of horrible things that involve animals on their holiday because they know it's grotesque and they don't want any part of it. And then there are people who just don't care, right? There are people who want to pet a tiger cub or have an opportunity to pay a couple of bucks and feed a bottle to a baby tiger. And they're just going to do it because they want it, because it's exciting, because the animal's cute, and they really don't care. And then there's a really, really important third group of people, which are the people who don't know. They don't know any better, right? There are plenty of people who go to zoos because they think it's good for education, because they think they're learning, or they go to a petting zoo. You know, all of these kinds of activities that people do while on holiday or for a good day out on a Saturday afternoon because they just don't know. And so that's where I think we have this amazing opportunity to educate folks and then let them make an informed decision, right? And so, you know, part of it is educating the tour operators, the travel companies. Part of it is educating people directly, but also through the tour companies. You know, they may say, I want to go on holiday to the Caribbean, and, you know, here are the things I want to do on my vacation. And you have a travel agent that says, actually, we won't do this. We won't do the, you know, get you photographs with a chimpanzee on the street because that's not good for the animals. And I can't imagine that most people are going to say, well, then forget it. You know, I'll go find somebody who will. It actually might spur something, and then that says, oh, wow, I never even thought about that. And then, you know, you reach somebody. Yeah.
I think it's really important that it comes from the industry. You know, the major tourism. And I was watching some of the people talking, like, you know, Virgin, you know, the responsibility officer of Virgin, you know, tourism. And I'm like, wow, you know, Virgin Air doing their tours and everything. But I was like, wow, these major organizations are stepping up. And I thought that was really incredible to see, because I think we are in the era of corporations. You know, there's a bunch of really bad ones, and I could give you a list right now, and some of them start in the tech industry. But, you know, I won't go there. And don't start me on the stock industry, too. I know, Microsoft. Thank you for wiping everything off my computer. Anyway, just had to put that out there. Why not? But anyway, no. But these organizations, we are in this world of, number one, a lot of smaller independent companies that do travel-related industry stuff. I think that travel writers are a huge part of what should be part of this program, because they go and experience and write about it, and they're the mouthpiece. they need to be part of this in a big way.
Exactly.
Obviously the destinations themselves, but these major corporations that are in tourism, that to me it's right there saying, okay, we're taking responsibility. And when a corporation does that, then you know what? Their clients are going to listen. They are. And I think it's exactly what you're saying, that twofold education. All I can say about everything that's going on in the world right now is it's a lack of education on all levels. And it's time to step up to the education plate, no matter what it is, whether it's climate change, animal abuse, how you travel, sustainability, do you have solar versus coal? All of that is about education. And we need to raise the platform for our kids. The youth need to know now. And it seems very long-term. We talked about long-term versus short-term. But if we don't start really focusing on education in a bigger way, that it is actually number one on all of our programs of life. Like you wake up in the morning and say, what am I going to learn today? That is where we need to be.
Short-term is
chaos management.
It's chaos, and it is not sustainable.
Yeah.
It's not.
You have to do a little bit of both, but
but if you don't back it up with something sustainable, you lost anyway. So.
Right. Wow. I like this, Adam. This is very cool. Animondial. I'm going to get it right. Animondial. ANIMONDIAL.com. Everyone, go connect with that. I mean, this is brand new, and like you're saying, it's based in England, right? They started over there with ABTA, and that's really the big British Tourism Association. And so for them to come together with this, I think that's pretty amazing. England is doing some cool stuff in animal welfare, I'm just saying, from what I've seen lately. They're doing some
and I think
things.
we'll follow. You know, if you've got the British travel agents that are working on this and establishing guidelines for travel and tourism that relate to compassion, I think eventually, the U.S. tour operators are going to follow, and hopefully it'll just go global, and it'll do so rapidly.
Excellent.
Cool.
Well, thank you so much for joining us and for letting us know about this. We're excited about it. Anything that can be towards sustainable, responsible tourism, we're for, and we appreciate knowing more about it. Again, everyone, Adam, he's an advisor on this, on Animondial. I'm going to say this all night long.
Excellent.
I want to be part of Animondial. Sorry, I like it. I know. But anyway, go to animondial.com. But blendradioandtv.com, you can see Adam in our expert department and listen to his past interviews. That really, this is really exciting, quite frankly, Adam. I mean, we look at all the negative stuff, but isn't this this is the step forward? This is it. I mean, this will end up being like, okay, really, are you going to be the tourism group that allows, someone to, sport hunting? Look at what's happening with the elephant trophy thing on CNN right now, too. It's like, what? So, I'm just saying, this is
exactly,
and
it's also. Sorry, I think the other thing that's important about this is it's thinking outside the box a little bit. We've been campaigners for decades and trying to get people to do the right thing, but you also have to think about things from an economic perspective and an industry perspective, and that's where this kind of project, I think, is really important.
Well, we appreciate you bringing it to our attention, and
thank you.
Everyone, Animondial.com, check it out, and everybody in the tourism industry get on board with this. And we want to continue the conversation with this and keep moving forward with this, so as it moves forward, because I think there's a lot of people that can be connected here in the States, and everywhere we talk, we'll just keep talking, Adam, because we're good at that.
Absolutely. Sounds great.
All right, you take care. Thank you so much for joining us.
All right, have a great weekend when it comes.
You too. And a Bloody Mary. All right.
Bye.
Bye.